for more, mobilizing God's people God's way. I want to tell you briefly about why we've chosen this theme of mobilization. Here's why. Because Sunday's coming, right? Each week as a church leader, you've got dozens, if not hundreds, of volunteer positions that need to be filled so that the ministry programs of the church can thrive. And let's be honest, some days that can feel like a grind. And if we aren't careful, we can slip into a utilitarian approach to mobilization, and we just see people as a means to an end to make the programs run. And I admit, there's been times when I was in a crunch and I took the low road. And when I'm in that place, the best way to describe my mobilization approach is the word nag. And I've got a need to fill by Sunday. A cost of member. I need you to do this for Jesus. And G, guilt. Used liberally. I don't know what I'll do if you don't help. And over the years, fantastic tools like Shape and Network have helped so many of us shift to gift-based volunteerism. And what a big difference that's made. And think about it. The church is probably the largest, most effective volunteer force on the planet. I don't think anyone even comes close. So go God, go God's people. But if you're watching this, I bet you've still got a splinter in your mind like I do. You know, there's something about this entire system of mobilization that just feels off. Most people, most churches operationally are still defining ministry as volunteerism, a few hours a month. And we know that's a far cry short of the biblical definition of mission and ministry, which is all of life. Yet most of our church's mobilization processes lead to volunteerism as the ultimate outcome. Deep down, we know the church is designed and made for more. And this year, we're going to explore a deep shift in how we think about and activate mobilization. To make it easy to remember, we are calling in the help of Home Depot. You're probably familiar with their slogan, "You can build it, we can help." In so doing, Home Depot positioned themselves as the resource and training center for millions. And the message was clear. We're here to help you accomplish your project. And that is the essence of this new but ancient approach to mobilizing God's people God's way. You see, in the "we can build it and you can help" approach, it's program focused. Most ministry happens in the programs of the organized church. It's also volunteer centric. The programs have mostly predetermined slots that need to be filled by volunteers. And it's a recruiting approach to mobilization that, let's be honest, that mostly keeps them inside of our organization. But the "you can build it, we can help" approach is an all of life focus. Most ministry happens where we live, work, learn, and play. It's calling centric. Ministry includes the entirety of your life, and everybody has a unique calling. And it's also a sending approach to mobilization. See, the role of the church in this approach is to be a Home Depot that empowers every disciple to discover their personal calling and then deploys them to express the fullness of Jesus through their personal calling in the particular corner of culture where Jesus has sent them. Now, Paul's letter to the church in Ephesus will be our roadmap. In fact, we've developed an entire resource kit for the journey. Each session highlights a chapter of Ephesians, and from that, a theme, a critical move, and an essential shift toward mobilizing God's people God's way. So let me highlight the moves from each chapter of Ephesians. So shift 1 from Ephesians 1 is from more effort to more Jesus. This is our foundation for mobilizing people. We need to equip every disciple to grow in the lordship of Jesus and in the power of the gospel. It's not about us striving more, but allowing the Spirit of God to illuminate our hearts to see how big Jesus is and how complete His gospel is. And when we see how big Jesus is, we will also see how big His vision for the church is, which Ephesians 1 describes this way: His body will fill everything every way. And that leads to shift number 2 from Ephesians 2, which is from more volunteers to more masterpieces. See, if Jesus' plan is to fill everything every way with His body, how in the world will He do that? Well, His strategy is not volunteerism. That word isn't even in the Bible. Ephesians 2:10 tells us that each of us is a masterpiece created to accomplish a unique body of good works. That is a one-of-a-kind masterpiece mission hand-designed by God. You can call it a personal calling. As church leaders, rather than seeing people as folks who might be able to volunteer a few hours a month, we need to see each of them as a glorious masterpiece built for a one-of-a-kind mission where God has sent them. That leads to shift 3, which is from Ephesians 3. And we need to move from more guilt to more love. A lot of the time as church leaders, we feel like we've got to keep pumping people up to keep them serving. But cheerleading or guilt, it will not sustain people in a lifestyle of service. Ephesians 3 tells us that only God's love for us and in us is the sufficient motivation for mobilizing others. So we need to help them understand and experience their own belovedness in Christ. And shift 4 from Ephesians 4 is moving from more hierarchy to more missionaries. Rather than cut and paste models of leadership from the marketplace where there are a few at the top with everyone else supporting them in their ministry, we need to go back to the original design. And Jesus' design is flat. The leaders are there to equip, serve, and release all of God's people as missionaries. And then shift 5, we need to move from more programs to more mission fields. How do we expand the footprint of the church's influence? It's not going to be by increasing the number of programs of the centralized church. It's by creating and multiplying the mosaics of missionaries where people have discovered, this is where I've been sent. This is my station for the Jesus mission. See, the people of God have already been sent and strategically placed by Jesus. That's good news. And for many, that place will be outside of the walls of the church. And that leads to the last shift, from more strategy to more surrender. And in Ephesians chapter 6, we discover that we live in a world at war and that our victory is contingent on our surrender to Jesus. And we need to learn how to engage in spiritual warfare personally. Even as church leaders, we need to pursue Jesus for our own inner healing and freedom in Christ. And furthermore, there are principalities and powers that are trying to influence the church and they're trying to oppress the world. And God has given us weapons that we can use to fight and win that battle. So these are the 6 shifts. And we've designed the Made for More resource kit as a journey for you, your team, your staff, your elders. There's 20 plus videos, 8 session guides, and everything you need to have a catalytic conversation that will help you begin mobilizing God's people God's way.